Hello YouTube, we got ourselves a new best of 3 to watch. It's going to be a Terran versus Zerg, Dark versus Cure, and also a team kill, both on team DPG. In the bottom left, it is Dark, and in the top right, it is Cure. Starting off on Tropical Sacrifice for this best of 3. This is from one of the Korean Open Cups happening on Saturday nights. For all the, I guess, Americans out there at the very least. Sunday morning, I suppose, for the Korea and around their time zones, which, well, afternoon, I guess. Yeah, more like afternoon, yeah. 1 p.m. Which, you know, wasn't actually the most popular, and I guess maybe still isn't the most popular time zone for the Koreans to play in. Speaking from past experience, back when I used to cast a lot of Korean tournaments, and also be a part of the scheduling as well. Generally, you know, it would just be late at night for them, early in the morning for the Americans, and that just seems to be like what they actually preferred. Actually, playing StarCraft 2 from like 7 p.m. and, you know, upwards to like 1 or 2 a.m. But apparently, this format's worked out well for the EPT Open Cups, and they've stuck with it for, I mean, over a year at this point, right? So pretty cool to have such big names like Cure and Dark actually joining in. Now, we did have a pool first from Dark, so there was a little bit of an interesting opener, considering we got 6 Lings on the way. What are the chances that Cure actually gets this command center up and running? Really depends on how his Reaper moves. So, if it's already halfway across the map and then comes back home, well, then the SCV is probably going to die, and the command center is going to have to be halted, not canceled. But if it sticks around for 10 extra seconds, then it would, well, first of all, it'd be scouted by the Overlord, so then Dark would wait with the Lings anyways. But then, maybe if it wasn't scouted by the Overlord, the Lings would just, get found out and killed. In this case, Overlord sees the Reaper moving across. It's already over halfway through the map, and these Lings are going to get a significant delay on the command center. Maybe they won't get the SCV, but yeah, it's going to be an SCV pool, so that's minerals lost. Pretty good timing on that, though. This is very fluid, although, okay, spoke too soon. That Marine is going to get cornered and die. Second Marine does pop out, and then the reactor gets added on, which might have also been... Well, I guess it wasn't a change-up. The Marine is already out, so this is just kind of fortunate for Cure's opener, I suppose. Well, I mean, fortunate is a... Yeah, I mean, I guess in the end of the day, it's still fortunate. The Reaper actually was microed on the other side of the map, so it didn't die accidentally to a Queen, which is pretty important, since there's a lot of micro back at home. So it didn't actually come back home. Cure figured that with 2 Marines, you know, eventually anyways, that the command center would finish, which is true. I think the idea was really more so, though, that the 2 Marines would be done and then working together with those SCVs as long as they needed to. And then it would have been, I mean, still not exactly easy, but a little less bumpy. It was kind of bumpy. It was kind of bumpy. So looks like this was with the Game Heart mod. We can see the, I guess, drastic differences. So this actually is when Cure pulled the SCVs and then back to normal, which is pretty cool. Speed did finish, and it looks like Cure had a little bit of a lopsided factory production, so loses 1 Hellion right off the bat, but really just needed 2. 1 Hellion perfectly microed, I suppose. That's really difficult to do. So as soon as you have 2, though, then the Zerg player really needs to add on more Lings than just this amount to do some significant damage, assuming that the Terran player is paying attention, which is kind of the trick. Any such early speedlings, I suppose, or at least such speedlings are going to be entering into the natural of the Terran player. It really depends on the Terran player just not looking for, you know, half a second. But all right, this is really important now. We got the stew going, I suppose. Armory on the way. Marauder on the way. It's going to be Hellbat Marauder. Pick up the Marauders. Dump them all over the Queens. Queens can't actually do the little micro that buys enough time and enough damage to actually mitigate the circumstances. Now, this is actually going to be really difficult, presumably, for Dark to hold. Now, Dark does have a Spine Crawler on the way. So I'm not sure that he was really able to pick up anything. He didn't see the Marauder, right? So all I saw was the Hellion so far. And then maybe the Viking, actually. Which, where is that Viking? It's already killed an Overlord. I mean, the only reason I'm really pointing out the Viking is because Vikings coming out first, I mean, really is probably one of the least popular ways of doing things. And we're talking about Banshees still being relatively popular, but then you go right into Banshees. You don't get the Viking first as professionals. If it's a battlecruiser, actually, that would maybe where you get a Viking as well. So there's still some ambiguity. But it looks like Dark, just acknowledging the ambiguity, acknowledging he has no idea what's going on, is playing it quite safe by getting a Spine Crawler. In this case, it's going to be right on the money. That Spine Crawler could help quite a bit, but this is just so much stuff. The Marauders actually did not try to boost over the Queens, so the medevac's going to be at full health, but it also means that the Queens might be able to actually shuffle a little bit more. So ideally, if you can boost over the 2 Queens, maybe 3 or 4 Queens even, but point is not all of the Queens all together. Some of them are spreading creep, perhaps, and you can just instantly tag 2 of them and get those kills. Now that Dark has had a little bit more ability to combine his army, and his army primarily Queens, of course, there is a little bit more to say for the defenses. There's not much as it's not Blitz anymore, which could have ended the game even instantly. This is far more about the micro. Now, Dark has made the decision to micro back at home with just basically the Queens and then send the Lings across the map. Fortunately for Cure, he did get a full wall off. Even before getting that command center, he made sure to actually get that wall off, but it looks like with that huge concave of the Queens, the amount of transfuses they had as well, Dark is not going to take game-ending damage to this push. And the medevac is still alive, so maybe you could pick up and do a little bit of damage here and there, but ultimately, I'm not sure that Cure really got what he wanted. Now, it's kind of a questionable moment, though, because Cure, I mean, if he wanted the game to end, okay, that sometimes probably happens, but not maybe too often in professional games, and Dark is just a really, really intimidating opponent. But other things he might have wanted from this is perhaps a lot of Queen deaths. So if there was 6 or 7 Queens, like if all the Queens died, right, then the Zerg has a tremendous problem. No Larva injects, no creep spread, and then no Queens building up transfuses perhaps for later engagements or drop defense, right? But that didn't happen. Only 1 Queen died. Maybe he was hoping that at least the drones would lose mining time, and maybe some of them would die. 2 of them died, and mining time was lost. But weirdly enough, what happened was that it is only 45 drones at that time. There wasn't a lot of mining to be done on that 3rd base. Now, Dark has put the droning as a priority, and so he's up to 65, going up to 70. So, the takeaway then is that at least Cure got Dark to stop building drones, right? At one point, they were at an even worker count, maybe 1 or 2 less for Cure, but an even worker count, right, for the Terran versus Zerg, that's a good sign. But as much as that is something we have to consider in any ZvT, right, how many stops and starts the Zerg has on their economy, I just don't think it was enough. Like, all of the Queens being alive, and you can see here how helpful they are against this push, means that there is still that layer of defense that you can go into droning pretty hard after an ordeal like that. So there's no like, okay, shoot, I overmade drones, I'm going to die to the follow-up push. So Dark is pretty comfortable at 68 drones, probably going to add some later on. He's up to 4 bases, getting 2 macro hatcheries in the main. Whoopsie daisy, ignore that. But yeah, getting 2 hatcheries in the main alongside the main hatchery. I think Dark is one of the players who's never been really shy about just saying, yeah, I can't actually use all this larva. So even though in this game, I mean, I guess one of the bigger problems that his 4th base was late and a lot of the injects weren't happening for a while. So absolutely, there's direct cause in this game to have all these macro hatcheries. I feel like it's not the first time that Dark has done this, to ensure that he has enough to spend on all the Ling Baneling that he wants. And speaking of Ling Baneling, Banelings only just now being made. Baneling Nest was fairly late overall, and so the cervical hooks is only just starting too. So that could be something that Cure takes advantage of. So far, unable to find really any openings. Maybe just focusing on the creep clearing as of now. Exactly that. I haven't spoken to Cure's side of the map for a little while, but as Terran do, he could produce army and he could produce SCVs. So yeah, the seamless transition to 3 base happened while I was talking about more important things, I guess, on the Zerg side. And it looks like the SCVs are pretty safe. Yeah, here you go down. So a very quick hop over with the 3rd CC. Biggest delay for Cure seems to be on his upgrades, but I guess the good news is the armory is already done, so he will be able to start up 2-2 immediately. And Dark actually prioritizing that +2 Carapace Might have meant to start +2 melee as well, or even just +1 missile going into Hydras now, but has missed that. So I think I am going to chalk that up to a bit of a mistake, considering that the resources are there. Yeah, I think so. But the priority given to +2 Carapace I don't think is a mistake. But maybe later on was planning on getting additional upgrades. Either way, Hive is on the way as well. Again, a very solid setup for Dark. I think this is where he starts to feel very confident and has gotten up to just about 80 drones. And should be looking towards a 5th fairly soon, too. Cure hasn't really gotten a lot of headway. I mean, even with the Hellbat push, there were the not direct damage to consider a lot more than the direct damage. But now it's not even really indirect damage. It's not either direct or indirect. There's not too much that Dark is really worried about. He's been keeping tabs on the drops fairly well. Creep has been pushed. Maybe not the most amazing creep ever, but it's still pretty good. It's going to cover at least the core 4 bases. Now the 5th, 6th, and 7th, the Dark is all getting at once. Okay, those aren't covered. So this one might be canceled. But by having so many bases being taken, it almost guarantees that one more will come up and facilitate the 74 drones mining now at this point, because so many of them are used on building buildings. 3 hatcheries and a lurker den are on the way. Tons of upgrades as well. He is going to go for that +1 missile over +2 melee, which I think makes sense as he is heading towards more so the Hydras. Oh no, he's getting +2 melee as well. Yeah, I was looking for that Carapace, and I was like, there's nothing red here. Well, it's because it was purple and it was +2 melee. My bad. So he is actually getting both attack upgrades. I was gonna say, later on maybe you will still go into that +1 or +2 melee, just because Ling run bys with the adrenal glands and further attack upgrades are pretty nasty. And not even just the Ling run bys, but still providing some help when they do get surrounds on the bio, right? So that still makes sense. Now Kier gets up to a 4th base. His 2-2 is about to finish. Does he have a fairly strong 2-2 timing? I don't think so, actually. 4 tanks going up to 6. Hasn't really opened up any weaknesses on Dark side of the map. In fact, did not get that base. So we're talking about Dark on now 7 bases. I mean, the amount of bases, to a point doesn't matter, quote unquote. I mean, they provide larva and they provide evacuation paths. So if one base does get bopped, you go to a different base. But other than that, it's not like he's going to be mining off of every single base at full saturation, right? That's just not going to happen, at least not for a while yet. But absolutely the evacuation path, and then just the feeling of oppressiveness, because then you can also start your creep spread as the hatchery gives you that advanced one. Get some queens over there. Just feeling more like the Zerg has taken over the map, right? So that even if you maybe should be able to get one of these bases, and maybe it's not a big deal for a Zerg, it's still like you can't even do that, because it's going to be scouted so far ahead. And maybe you do get it, but it's, again, not a very important base, and then it gives time for the Zerg player to react before you kill maybe a more important base, like for instance this 3rd or 4th, whatever it was. But they were clearly into the late game of ZvT. No one's really made a super powerful move on each other's side of the map, but we finally have it. Dark is going to use pure Ling, Baneling, Hydra, no lurkers involved quite yet, to actually bust down this planetary, which is a bit surprising. But so it goes. Cure was not quite prepared to tackle that defense, so the tanks weren't actually so much protecting the planetary as they were capable of watching it get destroyed from afar. I think good job, guys. So the Banelings ended up rolling into that with the Hydra DPS to help out a little bit as well, and the planetary falls, and that is seriously a difference of a couple of seconds. If the tanks are here and the bio's here, I mean, that still might be a little tricky just because the bio don't have a lot of time to move away, but still, maybe some of them take the brunt of the damage and the planetary barely gets held. But a quick snap of the 4th base neck, and that might not seem like a super big deal as the 5th just replaces it, is still just a really, I mean, it was easy for Dark, right? It didn't cost as much as you would think when the Terran was close to being able to defend, so it cost the suicidal units, which right now is not that expensive as Dark is comfortable on his economy. And then the Terran player has a little more doubt in their mind, I suppose. They can protect the next attack since the planetary is not done again. In this case, the army is prepared absolutely and totally. Liberator sieged up, tank sieged up, using this little cliff as well to help out. Will be broken by Vipers eventually, but we saw the attempted break there with Vipers, and both actually got killed. So, not the best use of the spellcasters, or perhaps just better to compliment Kier on dealing with those spellcasters. Still has plenty of bio to help out against some of more of like the run-by feature of the attack. So Dark is trying to throw kitchen sink kind of at Kier and hope that he messes up in some regard. So far, so good, I would say, on Kier's side. 7 SCVs went down. 3rd CC is going to lose a lot of its protective walls, which may or may not be rebuilt later, and that is a bit concerning. Dark, I think, knows that he's not going to just simply win right here, right now, as long as Kier is close to maxed out. But if you're going to create openings for future attacks, well, then that's when it gets really scary. And the Nidus Worm also would create that opening, but really well done by Kier. He totally predicted this, as a Terran should, of course, but with the rest of the game, you know, depending on how it goes, it can be very easy to forget to have a little squad of anti-Nidus units in the main base, so that Nidus Worm is not going to complicate matters, but Dark is still finding some little edges, I feel like, all over the place. So the Lurker's not quite able to get on this high ground. That is good. Lurkers over here actually did not get beautiful shots. Only 5 SCVs went down in the entirety of that attack, and then they ended up getting sniped. So, okay, this actually is not so bad for Kier. With the removal of so many Lurkers in the game, 10 of them have gone down as one on the retreat gets shot down. So that's actually much better than I was anticipating. When I saw that this base was kind of open, the army was coming, and Nidus Worm was in the main base, and Lurkers were on the right, ooh, that is the triple whammy that can absolutely kill worst Terran players. But Kier had done a nice job of using his bio primarily to tackle the left side, where he still had the help, I think, of the choke here. Not so much here, but it's an even farther pathway for the Zerg to get to. And then he had his tanks and Liberators on the right side, which initially was good enough, but then as the Lurkers kind of snuck their way in, the Ghosts also came over to help out. So this is just really good preparation, really, from the Terran player, whose primary job when they're on the defensive like this is kind of trying to think, I feel like, the way the Zerg player would think of how to open things up. So they are pretty much purely defensive in a game like this. So you can see that Kier has not made it to the other side of the map with a really big army, actually, since the Marauder Hellbat attack. The other ones were drops, basically. So he is just purely defensive. And then that means having all of the units in the right spot and the right combination of units as well, but then also a little bit of that predicting how would a Zerg player try and break me. So I think he's going to go over to the left with this army, so I'm going to have to respond with that army and whatever else on the other side, and perhaps even the main base of the Nidus Worm, right? A lot of things to consider, and you're never quite sure what the Zerg player is going to be throwing your way. Sensor towers can tell you roughly how large the army is, and of course if it is coming, but it can't actually really tell if it's Ling Baneling, Hydra Lurker, Vipers are coming in, whatever, right? So that can be a little bit more complicated. And then really the ideal defensive setup for a Terran player is going to have the units that deal with both a mass amount of units, so Ling Baneling, as well as more of the heavy hitter single unit types. So the Lurkers are heavy hitters, even though they never come single file, or they shouldn't anyways. Point is, they are the big chonky units that tanks would technically, like tanks Liberators technically do okay against, but really you want those Ghosts to come in, because the Ghost can take care of both the chonky endgame units as well as help out with the mass units of Ling Baneling. So unfortunately, it really does require just like kind of everything all together at once, but then you can't do that all the time since the Zerg's coming from different angles, so you kind of just split it as much as possible. You look towards your Sim City to help you as well, so Sim City of missile turrets and sensor towers actually is really helpful. Missile turrets against those Vipers, and even Overseers sometimes. And then planetaries are really helpful as well. So if you're struggling, because like for instance this line right here, technically a flood of Lings could do well against it. The Liberators wouldn't get killed, right, but the tanks would get overwhelmed. So what helps that? A planetary and or the bio and the Ghosts. But it's actually not that area it's going to be tackled. It is going to be the northern side, where there was a hefty amount of Sim City. Tanks well placed behind some of it, but it was just so much that it actually manages to crash through. 16 SCVs die, a chunk of Kier's army as well. I'm actually really surprised that that ended up being broken. It looks like maybe Kier could do with maybe a planetary here and the tanks behind it. But then what's really awkward about that is that you're kind of almost giving up kind of the top half of the map, because if you have planetaries here, then it would be really hard to defend this base and then defend this base, right? You'd have to be working against your own Sim City, so it kind of sucks. So it's right now primarily focusing on just one expansion at a time, And the expansions to the south are totally fine, but it's getting less fine as time goes on. You know, the far expansion to the south is actually going to Dark right now, who I think is really looking to mine out as much as possible, knowing that it may be broken. It may be. And then if it's broken with only 1,000 minerals left, it's like, oh no. Anyways, you don't really matter. And then Dark, I mean, he could take the hatchery here, just say that he has it, but he's keeping tabs on this base with just a bit of scouting. Scouting, I just want him. So Kira is going to try and take that base. So I was mentioning, if he put a planetary here, it might be a little more awkward, but he did not. So now the focus could maybe go to the top side as far as the expansion process. And what's nice about the top side is that he would almost be able to get 2 bases at one time. Almost, not quite. But these would be kind of coverable by a similar, the same army, basically, right? Like the army goes here, then it can run down there. Well, ideally, anyways. Not always the case. But unfortunately, you go top, Zerg goes bottom, vice versa. Zerg is at the end of the day going to be more mobile, even though lurkers drag the army down a little bit. I mean, 1, you could just not go for lurkers if speed is of the utmost importance. And then 2, I mean, they kind of drag the army. They're still pretty fast themselves thanks to their speed burrow. And they're surprisingly fast corgi butt waddling. And perhaps even faster if you get a notice room. That's also something to note. But as I mentioned, the whole, like, if speed is of the most important, so you just stop going lurkers, because that's actually what Dark has done here. Left some room in his supply for maybe figuring things out. Okay, it's going to be 11 Corruptors. Wants to deal with some of these Liberators that are giving him some headache. Liberators can only ever help so much against Pureling Baneling, but they do actually get, you know, they one-shot everything there. So if they're parked on top of an extended battle, and they are killing 20 units before the Lings decide to run away or suicide themselves. Anywho, but the Corruptors are going to try and take care of that, and then maybe go into Broodlords afterwards. I mean, I don't know exactly what Dark wants to do for that late game. Right now, he is sticking on that mobility. Ling Baneling trying to both cover the base expansion. So they were up here, but they couldn't do too much more. And then they were also trying to cover their own hatchery, but they couldn't quite do that either. Barely able to get the kill on the south side. But it's a kill that doesn't really lead to very much, you know? It's still good that Cure got it and got away as well, but... I mean, Dark's pretty easily gonna take that back. He's not exactly rich, he just spent a lot of money. Okay, yeah, on 10 Broodlords. And a bunch of Banelings, but... I don't think taking this base is that problematic? The main Terran force is not even over here. It is over there. So he still has to worry about over there, perhaps. Maybe this base could be next on the list. But it would take a little while as well. Kira wants to get his planetary up first and foremost, get that secured and locked down, and then the probably slow siege up forward to the top left. Broodlords have entered in alongside 8 Infestors that were made a little while ago. So the Ghosts are going to have to worry about that. So 1 Broodlord, 2 Broodlords actually died to the Ghosts before the Fungal scared most of them off. We got a very forward-placed Nidus Worm. Good lord. That's aggressive. Queen's actually taking out a Liberator. You don't see that too often. Like getting sniped. But the break seems to be slowly but surely happening. I guess right now, Kira is hoping that this will open up an opportunity to the north side, but not so much. Ling Baneling takes care of the bio. Liberators, a safe pathway backwards, but aren't exactly stopping Dark right now. As Dark can defend up here, apparently with Ling Baneling, and attack down here with the more complex army. Although also bringing a lot of Banelings now, and with that fungal on the Ghost, that might just mean every single one of them dies. Maybe a few will survive, and that is a hefty price of Banelings, sure, as Dark is not rich, but is at least stable mining. 84 drones mining, I think, pretty well. I mean, I doubt there's too much oversaturation, although, hey, look, a bunch of drones not actually mining. But the point is, Kira is no longer in the same position, down to 40 workers. A lot of muling has to be done to make up for that, and he does have 6 orbitals. But then he does also have to be mindful of keeping scans available, clear up creep spread, but then also know exactly where the army is coming from and what type of army it is. Just to keep that in mind. So there is Kira also expanding to this little, I guess, pocket kind of base, which did seem to be the next natural step to getting that 12 o'clock base settled. And now we might even have a push. Kira is not maxed out, but he does have 30 more army supply than Dark, who's trying to rebuild an army, but might not be able to do so. Corruptor's found on reinforcement pathway. And then this is just a really brutal spot for a Zerg player without air to actually be tackling this bridge right now. Lings do manage to just barely avoid the main army, get in there, kill 10 SCVs. We're getting cleaned up. And then I'm always looking at this Ling, but it's not going to do very much. Just literally scouting. That is all it is doing. So Dark has retaken the bottom side. He could take Kira's old planetary as well, and would probably want to. And then he has moved his main army over to his own, I guess, POC, whatever you want to call this base, as he prepares to defend, or maybe just prepares for the game to kind of go into this midpoint. So there was more about the fringe bases for a long time. Now it may be more about trying to attack through some of these chokes. This one of the more brutal ones. Coming in from this way is not too bad, and I guess once these rocks are broken, that might not be too bad either. I think it might be on Dark to break down these rocks. Might be his prerogative more so than the Terran. And I do have Dark taking that base. So, you know, resources lost, always big in a matchup like this. Dark is, of course, losing out, as you would expect from a Zerg player. And a decent amount as well, but he's also mined a crazy amount in this game. As that the income advantage, I'm not... Yeah, okay, since probably 9 minutes, maybe, is where Kira last had a shot at tackling it. And it's been a tremendous income advantage as well. Look how deep it gets, 3,000 per minute. It's pretty scary, but of course, army size still favoring Dark. Fungal could change things. Neural Parasite could change things. We have more Thors being involved, and we do have Neural Parasite. No, it's not a given who is going to win this one. Not at all. Both on a similar bank as well, and we're talking about a low bank, so no one's going to be able to replace too big of an army, but a couple of really brutal Fungals. Brutal because they've gotten those ghosts. The Thors were probably going to stand and fight as much as possible anyways, but they also got locked in. They got killed. Most of the ghosts have died. Cure actually didn't really have a proper army for that particular scenario. Because, well, what I'm trying to say is he didn't actually have Hellbats protecting those Thors. The Thors can stand and fight, or even just bio, actually. Like, point is, the Thors, they're not usually going to be micro too much, right? Like, if they're engaging Broodlord, they're engaging Broodlords, and your hope is that they're able to shoot them down fast enough because they're protected. Protected by Hellbats, protected by bio, even protected by Ghosts, which have decent DPS, but in that case, a lot of the Ghosts died. But actually, they weren't, and I don't doubt that the tanks were accidentally firing on them, at least occasionally, even if Cure tried to stop them. Just because you're like, no, tanks, don't do that. And they're like, yeah, okay, got it. And then they just immediately forget after you stop microing them. So, that was probably one of the worst fights that a Terran could have taken, and certainly a game-ending fight, unfortunately. So Cure... I mean, he still has that big army supply, right? It's still technically above that of Dark, but it doesn't actually matter. Cannot combat Ling Baneling, Infestor, Broodlord, and Dark will take a lengthy game number 1, just under 28 minutes. A very fun one as well. Let's go into game 2 of this best of 3. Game number 2 is going to be on Inside and Out. Top right, Dark. Bottom left, Cure. Both for Dragon Phoenix Gaming. The last game got really lengthy. It's quite long. But we shouldn't forget its roots. Started off with Dark going for 6 Lings and an early pool. That, I would say, did definitely disrupt Cure's opener. And then Hellbat Marauder attack. That was technically unscouted, but Dark did have the good foresight to get a Spine Crawler, considering he didn't know it was on the way. And I'm pretty sure he didn't. Again, I think the only tip he might have received was the Viking. It's gonna be another pool first, by the way. But yeah, the Viking. Otherwise, the supply depots on the front, I believe, were in, accordance to a 3rd CC eventually coming down. So if you saw as Zerg player 4 supply depots on the front and still no command center, that would be a tell, actually. But I'm pretty sure the last tell that Dark had, it was when there was only 1 or 2 supply depots down there. And then the Hellion count, I don't think, was a tell. There's no gas count that you could pick up. Yeah, so I'm just like trying to think exactly why he would be so suspicious, but he might have just been suspicious because he knew he didn't know what was going on. He knew that he was blind, especially after the Overlord was killed. So anyways, that helped him a little bit. And then also Kira's decision to unload the Marauders instead of trying to just pounce on queens, which might have occurred because he saw the queens were already too much together and didn't want to lose medevac health. But either way, it meant that Dark was able to collect all of his queens and actually micro them. So they also were building transfuse energy the longer the battle actually took to engage. So it worked out well for Dark, who then played a very, again, long game where there was a lot more that could have happened, but eventually got victory. Now we have a similar opener. 6 Lings going across the map against a Reaper into Marine opener. So once again, but the second Marine too is the question. Because that's something that could have improved Kira's defense, is if the second Marine had joined up with the first. But the first Marine got a little unguarded. The SCVs left him alone for too long. It is going to be a second Marine. So same thing should happen, where the SCVs are pulled. This SCV should be pulled away. These SCVs will be pulled in. And then the second Marine this time around should be able to join forces, which would be enough with the SCV pull for sure. Unfortunately, SCV number 1 died. But I think, is that a difference? Maybe it happened last time too? So maybe not even a difference. What would be really bad is if like 2 or 3 more SCVs died. And then I think the 6 Ling opener is still pretty happy with that. As it is, this opener from Dark would only be happy about the SCV pool. Be like, yeah, I lost mining, but it is now actually really happy because it is trying to keep the Terran player not scouting. I guess it'll only be so happy. They're actually going in there and saw that was Roachhorn. But now it's supposed to just be leading into the Roach attack, right? So if it was one of those things where Kira was worse, didn't scout the Roachhorn, or scouted it but didn't react to it, this would have led to a very easy game for Dark. But fortunately for Kira, he is as good as he is. And he got a bunker up. He did not go into Hellions, just all autopilot. And this is how you would want to respond to this. You do always have to be mindful of the follow-up roaches, which is why even in the first game, I believe the Reaper didn't choose to return home. It made sure to get that scout. So even though it seems like a natural response, oh shit, 6 Lings, let me bring the Reaper home. You got to get that scout. So either the Reaper does it or maybe like an SCV gets thrown out to the other side of the map as well. So really nice for Kira to keep that in mind, because I certainly forgot about the option. And Dark is certainly an aggressive player who would do this. Definitely don't want to lose that Cyclone. Getting the high ground Overlord is nice, but losing the Cyclone would be much worse. And it looks like Dark was hopeful he could just kind of tap it in. Could not, would not, should not. Have been able to, and he didn't, so. Cyclone gets fully repaired, can now go back in the chase. SCVs will get transferred since they're oversaturating the main base anyways, and Cure now kind of has to wheel his way out of a weird opener. Certainly when you do react to the Roach opener, you have put yourself into a weirder position unit-wise. If you're just very comfortable with only going into 6-8 Hellions, 3rd CC, so on and so forth, having this set of units and deciding, okay, do I go into Hellions or not go into Hellions, can be a bit weird. But fortunately, the pros have been up against this dilemma quite a bit. And I would say in general, we've had the inclusion of more medevac-based openers anyways. So it doesn't seem... I mean, it's not, maybe not as awkward as it once was back when this was still a fresh cheese years and years ago. So the choice for Cure is to... Actually, I think he did doubt himself, but he does go for a medevac. That much he was pretty much, guaranteed to do. But then he got a reactor on the barracks instead. Actually, never mind. Well, I guess that was the reactor rebuild just because the factory didn't get it. Well, so he kept it on there, but then decided to swap it off. So yeah, he put the factory on it and then decided, no, I'm not going to go into Hellions maybe. Then got the factory second reactor just to go more barracks, to be clear. But I don't think Cure was anticipating a follow-up all-in from Dark, who finished up that speed, and then he used the leftover Roach Ravager to break down any wall that would have been there. Here, desperately trying to re-wall as he gets a Banshee, because maybe he was at least somewhat mindful of a run-by attempt, and the Banshee would cover a lot. It doesn't, unfortunately, cover Speedlings too well. So it kills the Ravagers totally fine, but Speedlings, that's going to be a whole new problem. And while the reactor now trying to produce some of those Hellions, They just a little bit too late. Everything's a little bit too late. The Banshee was a little bit too late. If the Banshee arrives while the Ravagers come up on this high ground and then shoots on the Ravagers, maybe the wall can hold. If the Hellions come out a bit faster, maybe only 16 SCVs die instead of 31. But Dark with the second attack there. Surprise cure. Cleaned up Cure's drop in the main base. That did not do equalizing damage at all. And gets himself a quick 2-0. All said and done. First game was 28 minutes. Second game was just under 6.5. So, GG's, Dark does move on. He is quite the Zerg player. Hope you guys enjoyed the best of 3, and remember to subscribe for more StarCraft 2 casts. I'll see you later, guys. Bye.